What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. Break everything down on the NFL side of things from a gambling point of view. And it is week 11. Goodness gracious, folks. Blink, and we're at week 11 already. It has been a very, very intriguing season, and I think it proves that this stretch is going to be very, very interesting in the last 2 months of this season or so. But with me, as always, is my friend and co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing real well, even though it was raining outside today and 10 degrees cooler than yesterday, and they say it's going to be that way for a while. Hey, if that's the biggest issues in my world, I'm doing just fine.
Amen. And yeah, it's we won't tell you what that temperature exactly was once again for our East Coast listeners, so they don't roll their eyes at our thin skin out here. But yeah, it's the first kind of, I guess, winterish day, if you could have that here in San Diego. Thunder and the rain, and very interesting ride home. Not the greatest drivers when the sun isn't out, but we made it, and we are ready for week 11. However, before we get to that, as always, we're going to take a look back at week 10 with some of our thoughts on, for me, what I thought, at least take the morning game and the night game out of it, but the 10 a.m. 125 games here on the West Coast, that slate of games might have been some of the best we've seen all season, kind of compacted into one session. But Raider Jim, what were your thoughts on week 10?
Yeah, you mentioned it on the on one of those games, that morning game. I will tell you, I believe that was our last weekend in the United Kingdom and Europe for the NFL, and they really need to reconsider how they're doing this, how many games. If you want to send one or two, great. But if what you're trying to do is promote what a great, exciting game NFL football is, that wasn't a good curtain call or a good way to end the show. I mean, 16 total points for offense, uh, just ridiculous. And I don't know. Again, I would just reconsider if I was the NFL. Then again, uh, at least for this first trial, I'm sure they're making a lot of revenue. But at some point, the folks in the United Kingdom and Europe are going to say, I'd rather go to a soccer match. And quite honestly, some of these games I've seen, I'd rather watch a soccer match.
Yeah.
So that's the NFL in Europe. Uh, at the end of the weekend, I will tell you, I got to say, I think far and away, it's the Bills are the biggest disappointment in my preseason forecasting or what I thought was going to happen. They had it. You would think that they were going to be the team that came out, were going to be the team to beat, but 5-5, that is not a good look for the Bills. And then they lost to Denver, which no, nothing really against Denver, but the Bills just have been so inconsistent. We've said it. Depending on the week, we've been saying that they're inconsistent. And once again, there they were. It should have been their game. I believe they were 8, 9 point favorites in that one. They
I
had
think it
a
was 8.5.
big spread, and look what happened to them. And that was with Denver blowing two kicks,
Yeah.
2 extra points. I mean,
Really, three if you count the 12 men on the field. I mean, it would have been the Will Lutz. What's going on with Will Lutz if it wasn't for 12 men on the field?
yeah. And then at the end, I will say, I'll pat myself on the back at the very end of the game, second to the last play. I was walking through the living room. My lady's watching the end of the game. She goes, "This is pretty exciting." And I looked and I said, "He's going to push it right. I can tell you by where they're lined up." And sure, and he did. She's like, "How did you know that?" I said, "Yeah, I used to kick a football every now and then." So yeah, even with those mishaps, Bills couldn't pull it out or hang on to it. And then on the other side of that, after starting 1-4, big kudos to the Minnesota Vikings. Wow, they are now they're one game back of Detroit. And then if it wasn't for that last minute field goal by Detroit, they'd be tied with Detroit right now. And we did not see that after week 4, after week 5, after week 6. So kudos to the Vikings. They got something going on.
Definitely. I think Kevin O'Connell is putting himself on that, not top tier, but it's like, okay, this is a guy, he's established. I think he's a very good coach. Obviously knows the game. I mean, he's San Diego, or at least went to San Diego State.
Yep.
Here, was under Brady for a few years as his backup, and then obviously with Belichick. And I think you see it a lot of times. It's even, especially in baseball, a lot of times I always used to say the platoon catcher, like 9 times out of 10, those guys go on to be really good managers because you're on the sideline and you need to be in the game at all times, but not. And that's kind of what it is as a head coach. And Kevin O'Connell has done a fantastic job, as has Joshua Dobbs, who has been, I mean, I think the story of the season. Everything this guy has gone through, not only this year, but really his entire career.
Yep.
I mean, you want to talk about somebody who's been doubted his entire career. Seems like he's like the hot potato of backup quarterbacks. And if this guy ends up being a backup next year, it blows my mind because, with all due respect to some of these other quarterbacks we're seeing in the league, but I don't know how you can be someone in the front office of the Jets or the Giants or some of these teams who didn't make any moves. And the Vikings, I mean, let's be honest, Joshua Dobbs might still be toiling away with the Cardinals backing up Kyler Murray if it wasn't for an Achilles injury to Kirk Cousins. I mean, that was a very instantaneous move that they made right away. And then you got the Giants and Jets who are sitting on their hands with I knew I was going to call him that, Tommy DeVito and Zach Wilson. And you could be looking at Josh Dobbs. And at least with the Jets side of things, if the Jets had even a Gardner Minshew, the Jets would be a playoff team right now with that defense. So that's the main thing that, you kind of see with the Vikings. And I'm glad you brought up the Bills because I also wanted to touch on the Bills as well. Sure. They remind me a lot of the LaDainian Tomlinson, Phillip Rivers, Antonio Gates prime Chargers team.
Right?
And I grew up, I was a fan of that team. Yeah. So I'm not just bashing, but I'm talking about looking at it going, how do you have these players and you're 5-5? And the Chargers, it would always come down to December football. And look, a lot of times they got the job done. And it somewhat worked out for them, but a lot of times you put so much effort into just making the playoffs, you don't have anything left. And I don't think the Bills have a whole lot left in the tank. There's already a lot of chirping from Stephon Diggs. For better or worse, that's what you get with Stephon Diggs. If you're not winning, you're not feeding him, he's not going to be happy and he's going to be vocal about it. And then Josh Allen just has to protect the football. You don't need to be an NFL expert to watch the Bills and go, hold on to the ball. You probably win 2 extra games this season. And then one final thing, speaking of just absolutely kind of improbable, how are the Pittsburgh Steelers 6-3? Like, I don't understand. They've been outgained in every single game this season. I heard a stat that when teams have been outgained all 9, the average record is like 2-7 or something like that. And this team is 6-3. I don't understand it. I can't tell if Mike Tomlin is just the luckiest man in the world or the greatest head coach that ever walked this earth. Probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't know.
I'm not buying this is by design.
Yeah, I mean it's and it's not even, I don't know. It's almost unfathomable to look at this team and see how lackadaisical they play, and they're 6-3. It's you almost have to double take at the standings when you see it. But with that being said, and then also one final thing, I just got to dislocate my shoulder and pat myself on the back. Had a fantastic weekend. Finally, it was actually the first time I bet this year. Thank you to the Breeders' Cup. I kept my bankroll for the Breeders' Cup. Was able to transfer that into the NFL, and it was very, very nice weekend. So starting to feel good about myself. So you all know what that means. Fade Brandon this week. But anyways, with that being said, we are going to start here with week 11, our 10 games that we're going to be talking about. We do have 4 teams on buys. It is the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints, and then our friends coming back from Germany, the New England Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts. Although I feel like
It's
we should.
almost like four teams have a bye and nobody's going to realize it
Yeah, exactly. I'm okay with
unless we
this.
say it aloud. Nobody's going to remember. No. Oh, really? New England didn't play this week. The Saints didn't
Yeah.
play this week. No offense, coach.
Oh, that's why I enjoyed football this week. But anyways, um, not to keep piling on to. Well, actually, yeah, I am piling on to the Patriots because it's been 20 years of them piling on to us. So you know what? Yeah, Patriots are terrible. But with that being said, time to look ahead to Week 11. Thursday night football is our first stop, and it's going to be a very, very interesting matchup. Might be the biggest matchup in the NFC or AFC North, at least early on, and it is the Cincinnati Bengals. They will head to Baltimore. The Ravens are going to be 3.5-point favorites in this one. The spread the over under sits at 46. I'll get this one started. Obviously, Cincinnati. It seems like they were, going to hit their stride, and we went, okay, we can pencil in the Chiefs and the Bengals in the top two slots and let everyone else fight for the rest of it. And then the Bengals go out and kind of lay a bit of an egg. Although, once again, CJ Stroud is really, really good. It's starting to be a situation where it's not terrible to lose to the Texans. But for the Bengals, this is unfortunate. And for the Ravens, might have had the worst loss of the weekend, at least overall. There were definitely uglier losses, but the way Baltimore lost that game, it was ridiculous to say the least. And I'll be honest, at halftime, I was ready to put a Super Bowl future in on them because they looked that good. And then the Browns took over. Personally, on this one, I think I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it. However, I would go Cincinnati plus 3.5. I think Joe Burrow goes out and does enough to at least cover 3.5. Okay, I could see Justin Tucker running on with 3 seconds. Baltimore wins this one, 31-28, 27-24. And on that breath, I do think this game's also going over. I think we're going to see some points being scored. Look, if Deshaun Watson is going to put up 33 on the Baltimore defense, I think Joe Burrow can do the same. So give me the over. I'm definitely more confident in the over on this one. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Baltimore favorites at home against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I tell you, you're right. I felt the same way about Baltimore. I think I said last week that between them and Kansas City, they were the top two teams in the AFC at this point and going to be in that last game before the Super Bowl. Now I'm not too sure. It's almost like either they sometimes when you're running downhill, you don't realize you were supposed to trip about halfway down or 30 feet behind you, and I probably not the case. It's kind of discounting how well Cleveland has played on the defensive side of the ball. So I don't want to take away from them, but I mean they put some points up, and yeah, now Cleveland's got another issue because they lost their quarterback. But people are writing them off already, and it's like I wouldn't write them off right now if I was you, especially the game that we're going to get to in about 15 minutes. But and Cincinnati on the other side of it, wow, said it last week. Cincinnati, I had written them off early on, but they've been coming back, and they don't look like they look like they're mended and playing well. And I think this game, they know this is kind of a do or die situation for them. Week 10, yeah, every game's going to start to be do or die for a lot of these teams. So watch for Cincinnati to cover. I do like them covering at 3.5 plus. That's not a bad look. And then 46, kind of low because these are two scoring teams, and all we got to see is 28-21, and we got it beat. And I think we'll see 28-21, if not 28-24. So yeah, give me Cincinnati to cover the spread, and then over 46.
Yeah, it's going to be a big matchup in the AFC North. That's a really, really good division. I think everyone's over 500. I think everyone's a playoff team, maybe missing one, but it's a very competitive division. And these are the games, in November. You can't win your division in November, but you certainly can lose it. And I'll be honest, I think if Cincinnati loses this game, I don't see if they get back into this race unless something crazy happens. But it's going to be very interesting as the Ravens host the Bengals. That'll be a really good. We've had a lot of really bad Thursday night football games. This is going to be a really good one, I hope.
Yeah.
Moving on, going to stick in the AFC West. It is the Las Vegas Raiders. They're heading to Miami. Wow. The Dolphins are 13-point favorites in this one. The over-under sits at 46.5. Look, as I've always said, no one gets the first word on Raiders football on this podcast network outside of Raider Jim. So, Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Members of the Raider Nation, please look at the gray hair. I've been around. I've followed this team. Let's not get too excited about 2 straight wins, especially when one of them was against the Jets and the other one was against the Patriots. Okay, let's just not get too excited because now you're going to have to play some football. You are not going to be able to have your offensive or your defensive line pushed around the way they were. You go back and look at the stats. If I'm not mistaken, I never saw Max Crosby being a real threat in that game. They knew they kept him in containment. Some guys stepped up, but if not for the interception at the end of the game, they were positioning themselves to tie it up or to give up the lead. Bottom line, it was that I understand clock was running down to the last play, that type of thing, but they weren't containing. They weren't containing. Once again, the coverage, the line getting pushed around, and the inability to put points on the board. You know, they had 30 points on the board the week before, and everybody got excited because there was a coaching change. They didn't put up 30 this last week, and they're not going to put up 30 against Miami. However, the defense, I think, will play well enough to maybe not let Tua and the boys roll it up too bad. Right now, I see that it's 46.5 is the over-under on this one. I'd take a full point and go under 47.5 on this one, but I'll take the Raiders to cover. I think the Raiders can cover in this one, and really saying that, let me rethink my over-under bet because it's going to have to be lower scoring because the Raiders aren't going to put up 24 to 28 points against Miami. So let me change the over-under to under 47, and let me have the Raiders cover at a plus 14.
Yeah, I also like the Raiders to cover here, and it's more so the point spread than the team in terms of the Raiders.
Yeah.
In the NFL, plus 14 or plus, because I'm going to buy a full point, get it from plus or minus 13 to 14 just to cover for 2 touchdowns, that weird kind of thing. I'll pay for that. But garbage time is a big thing in the NFL. And garbage time equals backdoor covers. And that's what I see here. I don't see this game being necessarily competitive, but I do see Aiden O'Connell, because Jimmy G's done, right? Or he's out for a bit. It's going to be Aiden O'Connell shit for a bit.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So I don't see them, necessarily, keeping it close, but I see it 5 minutes left, down 20 points. Miami's on the sideline, sipping their Gatorade, looking ahead to whoever they got next week, blah, 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 figuring out who they're going to swap jerseys with. And Nate O'Connell takes his team down, prevent defense, no skin off anybody's backs. Maybe the cornerback's got the wide receiver on his fantasy team, something like that. I don't know. But I just see this game as a backdoor cover on that side of it. So give me the Raiders. Like I said, I'll buy that full point to get to 14. I do see some points being scored here, though. And I think it's a lot of the way Miami plays. They are so fast offensively, and obviously speed-wise, yes, but I'm more talking about speed in terms of how quick that defense. I mean, there are a lot of times, even in scoring drives, it's like, hey guys, thanks for scoring 6 points, but maybe you could take 5 plays, take 2 minutes off the clock, or
right.
Give us 10 minutes. And I think late in the games that does kind of come back to haunt Miami defense, but I don't think it will, at least on the the scoreboard side of it, to make this game competitive. But I do think the Raiders have a second half where maybe they're down 24 points at half. I hate to say it, but I could see it happening. And the Dolphins aren't necessarily a team that take the foot off the gas, but I could see them possibly being in a situation where it turns into something like that. But I do see some points being scored on that side. So staking in the AFC West, it is going to be another very interesting game. The Chargers, they're heading to Green Bay to face the Packers. The Chargers are 3-point favorites in this one, and the over-under sits at 44. AFC West, is Raider Jim's jurisdiction. So, Mr. Martinez, what are your thoughts? Chargers favorites on the road against the Packers.
Yeah, even last year's Packers, I would be scratching my head saying, what are they thinking? But, this year's Packers, they're definitely the team that can stand in front of the fans and say, it's a rebuilding your kids. So
Yeah.
bear with us. There's no snow. Weather's not going to be an issue, at least as of right now, weather's not going to be an issue. So based on that, Chargers 2.5 or Chargers -3 is not a bad call. I would take a half point, as you and I often do. I'll take the Chargers -2.5 because I think their offense is going to have a little bit of success out there on the not so frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. But they'll get some points on the board. I don't think that the Packers are going to get points on the board, or not a tremendous amount. Over 43, I can see, because I can see a 24-20 game, 24-17, maybe something like that. So I've got, or excuse me, 24-20. I have no issues with the score like that. But Green Bay just isn't going to have the defense to slow down the Charger offense, and they're just not. Green Bay's just not being that productive right now. So Chargers -2.5, over 43.
Yeah, I had a literature teacher, American literature teacher, one of my favorite teachers. He used to play offensive line for San Diego State, really good guy. But I would always turn my papers in, and at the end, the conclusion, I would say in conclusion. And he brought me over one day and he goes, "Hey, Brandon, I love your writing. You're doing great, blah, blah, blah. But every single paper you turn in, your conclusion starts with in conclusion. Like, I need something else." So the point being, you would think that maybe on my betting side of it, I would do something that, wouldn't be the in conclusion. No, I'm buying a half a
That
point.
was good.
Yeah, if it works, it works. I'm buying a half a point. Give me the Chargers. I don't think the Packers are a very good team. I'm surprised it's only 3 points. I mean, I know it's on
Yes.
the road. We're not dealing with weather. The 10 a.m., I guess, internal clock, you could maybe make the case for that. I don't think that this is a massive coaching mismatch, because that's what I do worry about with the Chargers. I have very little faith in Brandon Staley. But I don't really have a ton of faith in Matt LaFleur minus Aaron Rodgers. So I like the Chargers here. Give me that half a point. Like I said, always Chargers -2.5. I think this is a game for the Chargers defense, for them to, like, I call it the punch someone game. They are going to look for someone to punch. They're not going up against a good offense like the Lions. In those situations, I think they're going to get after Jordan Love, and I think the Packers are actually going to really struggle to score. Chargers have the second most money invested in defense, and they're one of the worst statistically. At some point, that has to at least get close to average. And I think this game could be one of those that starts to turn the pendulum in that direction. So give me the Chargers 2.5, and the under 44. Moving on to Sunday Night Football. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings at the Denver Broncos. I tell you, about 3 weeks ago, this looked like a really bad football game. Now, I can kind of dig it. But it is going to be the Broncos at home. There'll be 2-point favorites. The over-under sits at 43.5. And as I mentioned, it is Sunday Night Football. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Vikings heading to Mile High.
Yeah, this may not be a bad game for Sunday night. And as much as I sit and whine when it gets under 70 degrees, I'm like, I could go for some snow in this game, sure, because I'm not going to be sitting in it. But the Minnesota Vikings, we already talked about it. They were one of my 3 points that I mentioned as far as the end of week 10 and how well they're playing. I said it about the Raiders. I'm going to say it about the Broncos. Back up, kids. Let's not get too excited because they beat the Bills. This is not your Bills of last year, the year before, and the year before that. So, and by the grace of God, they got a second chance to win that game the other night. Otherwise, they'd be sitting at 3-7, I believe. They're not, for them to be a 2-point favorite just boggles the mind. And actually, going down and checking the spreads before we got on here, Vegas Insider now has it at 2.5. So Vegas has Denver at -2.5, which means I will take Minnesota +3 on this one. The over/under at 43. I think you'll see some points. Absolutely, but I think and it's a low over under. It's 43 and a half. I'll buy a half point and go over 43. Denver offense can definitely score, but Minnesota offense is going to score too. Don't count them out by any stretch. They should not be the underdog, even though they're on the road.
I think I just got that feeling that Peyton Manning got when he was under center in the shotgun and a defender moved and tipped the play and he made the perfect audible because when you said the line moved to -2.5, everybody knows what I'm doing. But just what you just said, I'm doing the exact same thing. I was going to take Minnesota money line. Like I said, I don't really mess around with 2 point spreads and stuff like that, especially if I can take the plus side of it. And I think Minnesota's the better football team. Justin Jefferson could possibly be coming back. He's at least been,
Yeah,
activated to practice. A lot of people out there going, "Oh, they were 0-5 with him," but get out of here with that. Okay, if you think the Minnesota Vikings are a better football team without Justin Jefferson, please give me a call. I'd love to take some of your money on some bets. But it's I think it's the Vikings here, and this is almost a scary game for me. The Broncos have obviously played a lot better the last 3 weeks, and I think Sean Payton, that ego, took two big hits, giving up 70 and then losing to the Jets and Nathaniel Hackett, who he absolutely just ripped into in the offseason. And I think he wasn't going to let that happen again. I don't know. Like I said, I think they might have been practicing for 14 hours. All devices taken away, kind of, a North Korean style situation. And then they've come out and they've played much better. Russell Wilson is playing okay. I mean, he's still overpaid, but he's definitely serviceable.
yeah.
However, I still think Minnesota gets the job done. I do worry about the altitude. Sometimes when you have NFC teams that don't play Denver, I mean, every 8 years, Minnesota is going to play in Denver if the schedule works out that way. So just something to keep in mind, but that's not enough to get me off of Minnesota, especially when the spread's 2.5. So Minnesota +3. Oh, and I do like the under here. I just think, actually, no, you know what? I like the over now that I think about it. 43.5. I don't know what I was thinking with that. I think some points are going to be scored, and we don't really need that many at only 43.5. So moving on to, game of the week,
It's going to be
definitely,
a
maybe
great
game of
game.
the year. It's Monday Night Football. I think the game, look, we've gone through some pretty primetime games. This is the pot of gold at the end of the, bleak rainbow. And hopefully it lives up to the hype. It is, of course, a rematch of last year's Super Bowl. It's going to be my Philadelphia Eagles. They're heading to Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are 2.5 point favorites. The over under is 45.5. Look, this is a really big game on the outside. And I think there's probably going to be the most watched Monday Night Football game ever for a lot of reasons, but mainly I want to say because of the game that's being played and the two teams that are being played and not who's in the stands. But this game, really on the inside, and I hate to be that guy, I don't think it matters that much. I know, you want to win every game, but no alarm bells are going off for either team if they lose this game.
No,
Maybe Kansas City because the one seed turns into turmoil, stuff like that. But the Eagles look and they have everything out in front of them no matter what happens. Now, obviously, if the Eagles go out and get the job done in Arrowhead, it sends a statement. It kind of makes them the bona fide number one. And obviously, I think it wraps up the one seed in the NFC. But if they don't, they're 8-2 with two non-conference losses and a game with Dallas and San Francisco coming up. Probably the two teams that you're going to need to be fighting off. So once again, I hate to be the guy to kind of like the party pooper and all that stuff, but I just don't think the game matters too much. So with that being said, I think both of these teams expect to end up where they ended up last year against the same team. I think this game is going to be played very close to the vest. I think it's going to be a interesting, I'm not going to say a preseason style game, but we're not going to see any Philly specials being ran, or at least I don't believe so. I think Kansas City goes out, and I think they win the game. And look, if you know me, I love a 2.5 point spread. So give me Kansas City minus 2.5. Um, I just I think they get the job done. It's going to be an Arrowhead. Atmosphere is going to be raucous. I expect the Eagles to put up a hell of a fight, but this game isn't the game that we want. We want the one in February. So in terms of the over under, I do see points being scored. Just because we're playing it close to the vest does not mean we are going to see a 10-6 ball game. We're going to see two offenses get after it, two very good defenses as well. But I just think also defensively, especially on the Eagles side, they still have that bitter taste in their mouth from last year's second half Super Bowl. They're not going to show a whole lot defensively to kind of, any disguises or anything like that. They'll hopefully show that later on against Kansas City. But give me Kansas City minus 2.5 and the over. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Eagles at Chiefs.
Interesting take on the game on your side. I think what I'm waiting to see is how productive is Patrick Mahomes in the offense without, my goodness, why did his name escape me? The
Bieniemy.
Bieniemy. Yeah, I really am. I mean, you and I said it early in the season. Wow, what's with Kansas City? Wow, yeah, they put up some points and they were beating people, but they were really having to work to do it. They didn't hit the over under on a couple of games. They were just really they had to really work to win. And I'm wondering if Philadelphia isn't going to come out and it's not a statement game, as you're saying. It doesn't. They don't have to win this one. They're not going to be out of the picture by any stretch if they lose this one. But I think they really, really want to win this one, and I think they want to come out and show different looks now. That just enough maybe to do that mental thing where they get in the coaching staff's head and some of the players' heads on Kansas City, where it's like, what are we going to see if we see them down the road? If we end up meeting again in February, what's it going to be like? So I think Philadelphia is going to come out. I think they're going to put up a great, great, great game, as both teams will. But I actually like Philadelphia on the money line on this one. That's where I'm looking right now. And you got to wonder, is Philadelphia going to go more with the why don't we eat the clock? I know. Let's control the line. Let's get it in 3 and 4 yard increments. Let's get it in tiny little passes out in the flat. But we don't got to work. We don't have to play West Coast football and AFC West football and go vertical on this thing. So I even wonder about the under. Vegas Insider had it at 46.5 before you hit record. I might take another point on that and go under 47.5, but I do like Philadelphia in the money line on this one. I think they're going to come out. It's going to be more their game than Kansas City's for all the right football reasons, and not, as you alluded to, who's in the stands.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I am probably one of like 7 Eagles fans who believe that this game doesn't matter, and a part of it is I just don't want to get all this up, because it is such a big game, and I don't. The big part of it is, at the end of the day, it's week 11, and I do think they're going to be. Look, my Eagles fans are not the most rational. Fans in general aren't very rational, but I just don't want the overreaction if we lose this game, something like that, because outside of us getting blown out, and you brought up a really good point, because the Eagles have obviously their defense has played very well, and it will be interesting to see how Mahomes kind of deals with that, because that'll be enemy. As you said, it's been we haven't been used to this Patrick Mahomes where it's 17-14 with 2 minutes left in the game, and we're like, what's going on? Like, this is, good for the defense, but let's see some points being scored. So, but I think at the end of the day, I just want it to be a really good game. Obviously, I want the Eagles to win, but I want this to kind of live up to that mid-season matchup that we all wanted. Look, when they added one extra game to the season, this is the Eagles' one extra game. So this is your kind of, I guess, present, if you will, for the +1 game. So here we are. But sticking in the NFC East, this one not going to be as tight, I believe. But it is the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to head to Carolina to face the Panthers currently, or at least as of yesterday, I should say. The Cowboys were 10.5-point favorites in the over-under of 42. Currently, yes, sorry. This one is going to be, I don't want to say a laugher. I don't think it'll be the 49-17 that we saw the Dallas drop on the Giants. But if there's one thing I know for sure with the Cowboys, it's they beat really bad teams and they beat them up pretty good. They're kind of like the bully at school that waits for the other bullies to maybe get distracted over here and then goes picks on these kids. And then the other bullies see what's going on and he's like, runs away, blah, blah, blah. But I think Carolina is unfortunately one of the smaller fish in the pond. And I think Dallas dominates. They go out, they get the job done. I don't see Carolina scoring a whole lot of points. It's a really low number. I have under listed on my notes, but I don't know. I could see Dallas putting up 42 themselves. This could get ugly. I'm going to take the over 42. I think Dallas does a lot of the heavy lifting in this one in terms of the over-under. Maybe Carolina gets 10, 13 points, but I could see Dallas getting 31 to 35 themselves plus. So give me Dallas minus 10. So I will buy a half a point just to kind of keep myself there. And then over 42. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you capped that one perfectly. The only thing I will say is it's not Dallas's fault.
No.
They just do what they got to do. This is like when you have those D1 powerhouses, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, and they roll it up and they're up by 38 going into the, second half of the third quarter. And so they start putting in the second string guys who, guess what? This is the longest they're going to be on the field for who knows how long. So they go all out and they roll up another 20 points. It just happens. That's what the Cowboys do. It's not their fault. It just happens. It's the cards they're dealt. Carolina, this is a bad team. This is just not a good team at all. I wouldn't even touch the spread. Does Dallas cover at 10.5? Probably. Do they cover at 14? Probably. I mean, I would like to go back, and I may take the time when I'm really bored in the next week or so. I'd like to go back from week 1 and see how many ridiculous spreads we've had this season. The 13s, the 14s, the 10s, the 9.5s. I mean, to me, more than I remember over the last several years. Definitely since you and I have known each other. Anyway, back to the game itself. Dallas probably will cover the spread. I'm not betting the spread, but I do think it's going to go over 42. As you indicated, I can just see Dallas rolling up 35 points and then letting Carolina score 10.
Yeah. And look, Dallas dominated that game, but early on in that one, Dak threw an interception. And I mean, it was the only time that anything even, but there was a part of me that went, hold on, like this would be something. Now, obviously, it didn't happen, anything like that, but Dallas is the antithesis of the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills should be doing this to the teams that they're getting beat by. And Dallas, like you said, it's not their fault. You put someone in front of them, and if they beat them up, they beat them up. As Drago said, if he dies, he dies. But with that being said, moving on, this all NFC East matchup. Ooh, tough one here. If you're gonna watch it, my thoughts and prayers to you. But it's the New York Giants. They're heading to Landover to face the Washington Commanders. As of yesterday, it was a 9.5-point spread for the Commanders. The over-under sits at a paltry 37, and I am just going to start with the over-under. I am taking the under in this one. Now, I really do like Sam Howell. I think Sam Howell has some staying power. I don't know if he is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but I think you could, if Sam Howell was on the Jets right now, the Jets would be a team that you'd need to keep your eye on. Maybe even throw, and I'm not, no disrespect to Joshua Dobbs, but same with like the Vikings, something like that. He can't be the main guy, and unfortunately, because of the moves the Commanders have made, he is kind of the main guy. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, the Giants, that's their strength. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous considering they just got 49 dropped on them, but this is not the Cowboys offense. This is not the Cowboys game. I still think that Washington covers this, but I don't think Washington puts the points up that that the Cowboys did, or the points up needed to get over 37. So as crazy as it is, I'm taking under 37 in this one. I just don't see a ton of points being scored here, and I don't think Washington needs to score a ton of points. I think Washington's perfectly fine winning this game 21-10. And that might be the ceiling on the Jets, let's be honest. Because I don't think we're gonna have as much garbage time as they had last time for Tommy to get the stats up. So give me Washington -9. So I am gonna buy a half a point and under 37. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Giants at Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, Washington has been one of those teams that I've been burned by them more than one. I was burned by them last week. Let me tell you, that game, I think it went into the total on that game was over 60, wasn't it?
Uh
Um, was that, am I thinking the
oh
right game?
yes. Yes, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, yes.
yeah. And it's just
66.
like there's no way that they're gonna go over on that game, and this is what happens. Giants, on the other hand, the Giants are the Giants. What a ooh, not a good team. Uh, but on this one, this is going to be one of those weird games where Washington has the inconsistent week. The Giants have the inconsistent week. So you almost have to start going that route, or I'm going that route when I look at these. Even though Washington rolled up some points last week, they're not going to this week. It's going to be, as you already alluded to, this will be boring. But we might see 21-17 and shock everybody. 21-17 tells me one thing, that one, they're going to go over the 37 or 36 and a half if you want to buy a half point. And I think the Giants, give me 1/2 point and let me get the Giants +10, and I think they're going to do me right this week. That's just a real stretch, but the way everything else has been playing out this year, why not?
Yeah, and also, if you are forced to watch this game, get in touch with your local authorities. I believe that's cruel and unusual punishment, but that's, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that would be the case. So moving on to another intriguing. We started the show with an AFC North matchup that was very intriguing, and we have another one. Obviously, that's kind of the way the AFC North is this week. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are heading to Cleveland to face the Browns. Now, we did have a movement in the line, Raider Jim, because I did want to check, because the news came out today. Deshaun kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, I know Deshaun Watson had been in and out of games, but he looked pretty darn good this past week. But Deshaun Watson out for the year, bone chips or some shoulder surgery. So
Shoulder.
he's got to get some stuff figured out. Um, tough luck there for the Browns. So the line has already moved to -1 as of about 20 minutes ago. It might have even dropped more, but this is probably going to end up being Pittsburgh -1, -2 when it's all said and done. But with that being said, Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Steelers heading to Cleveland. Oh, and the over-under is 36.
Yeah, and I'm just now, because I knew about the injury myself, and I wanted to see, because I had made notes off to the side, and it's like, okay, things have been changing. So pulling it up right now on Vegas Insider, they've got it at Cleveland -1.5. But what's really surprising is they've got the over/under at 32.5.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, that's but we talked about the way that Pittsburgh scores points, and as good as the Cleveland defense is, I can see this being a defensive struggle, but 32 points, no, 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 no. So I'm going to take, I'll give me over 32.5 in this one. On the money line, I think Cleveland is going to have enough to get this one, especially at home. So I am going to take Cleveland on the money line, even though they won't have Deshaun Watson. Somehow they have stayed in it when he was playing, when he wasn't playing. Pittsburgh, as you alluded to earlier in the show here, how are they doing it? How have they done it? But Cleveland just went out and put together a good game. I understand Deshaun Watson was behind under the center, but they took out the #1 team in the AFC, or at least one of the two best teams in the AFC last week. They're going to take care of Pittsburgh at home.
Yeah, great call on that, Raider Jim, because I only had my eye on the point spread because I just pulled up Bovada, and I just, as you said that, put in my over 32.5. That seems crazy. 32, that's 17-16, and we're home free. That's That's crazy to me. So, but
And
yeah,
weather's not a factor. Weather will not be a
no,
factor in this
and
one.
these defenses are good enough that I could see maybe one or both of these defenses getting points themselves, or at the very least putting their offense into field goal territory right away, or a red zone situation. So yeah, give me the over 32 and a half. But I do think Pittsburgh's wins this game. I heard, I forget who it was, some NFL kind of talking head guy. He had said the Steelers are that meme from Breaking Bad where it's Jesse going, he can't keep getting away with this. And he's screaming, that's the Steelers. They can't keep getting away with this. And I think they will. I don't know. I think PJ Walker going back there, very serviceable quarterback. I mentioned it, when Deshaun Watson was down. The offense looks pretty much the same with him in. You don't really see a difference in terms of quarterback play. Now, last week, Deshaun was pretty darn good, but overall, not a huge drop off. But I just think this Pittsburgh defense, they're going to get after it. I have more faith in them, mainly because I just watched Cleveland give up 31 points to Baltimore, which is a good offense, but it's hard for me to really get behind a defense a week after dropping or getting 31 dropped on him in a defensive battle like this. And once again, when I say defensive battle, it will be a defensive battle, but it will not be an under 32 and a half defensive battle, as I knock on wood and realize how ironic of a statement I just made and how much I jinxed myself. But anyways, moving on to an AFC South matchup. It's going to be the Tennessee Titans. They are heading to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. The Jaguars are 7-point favorites as of yesterday, and the over-under sits at 40. I'll get this one started. I don't know what to make of Tennessee because we obviously saw the debut of, or the unveiling of Will Levis, and my goodness, it looked really good. He looked like the second best quarterback in this draft, behind CJ Stroud, obviously. And then he played against Pittsburgh, and there were plays where you went, that right there, he needs to figure out, that will play in the NFL. But there were other sides where you realized, oh shoot, this is a rookie, and things like that. And I think we saw it again last week. 6 points being put up. There's flashes there, but it's not enough. And they have, just as crazy as this sounds, Tennessee has no run game. So I'm very, very confused. But on the other side, Jacksonville, I don't know what to make out of them either, because I expected San Francisco to win that game, but my goodness, 34-3 at home. Um, that doesn't show very well for November football. And as I've done this year over the last month, when I have two teams that I really can't get a feel on, I'm just going to take the points. Give me the points and let the uncertainty figure it out. I am going to buy a half a point. So give me Tennessee plus 6.5. The over under is give me the under 40. I don't see these offenses putting up a ton of points. Trevor Lawrence seemed to have regressed a bit over the last few weeks, which is not great. But that's what I got. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I Tannehill's back. He's not going to be hurt, so he's going to be healthy if they need him. Levis is back to 100%. He was a bit questionable this week. Uh, -7. I'm with you against Jacksonville. -7. They put up 3 points last week and shut out the entire second half. I'll give it to you. That's a whole different defense than what you have with Tennessee. But at home, that just makes me shake my head and wonder what's going on. Tennessee, I think Tennessee comes in, covers this one. I think they're going to put together an okay offensive side of the game, and have just enough defense to stay in it. So even though they don't get the win, maybe to cover by 7.5, absolutely. So I like Tennessee plus 7.5 on this one. Another one, low score, the over under at 40 just seems a bit head scratching, but at the same time, if that's all Jacksonville's done, and then I think last week it was a very what they put up 6. How many points did they put up? The Titans.
Tennessee.
Yeah, 6.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, excuse me. Yes. So yeah, so to go under 40, not going to surprise me.
Yeah, it's This is going to be an interesting one. And I did misspeak on usually when I buy a half a point, it's 2.5 to 3. So I'm rusty with this. I'll take Tennessee plus 7.5. I'm not giving Vegas a half a point. Yeah. So yeah, there we go there. But
I
yeah.
might change the channel and watch the Giants and the Commanders.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Just why not?
Wow. You know, Will
great.
Levis kind of intrigues me. And then I also will say, apparently, and I respect this a lot. The mayo in the coffee, it was all a gag. He got an endorsement out of it. Good for him. But I like that. That's my type of humor. Now I did see him actually drink a cup of coffee with mayo. So at the very least, he had to do it one time.
Right.
That's committing to the bit there. So good for him. And then I don't think he eats the bananas with the peels on. So it's kind of hoping that was true. But you know what? Not everything in life is how you want it. It's all an illusion. But that should be an interesting one. Moving on to this was, I always put together the list, and pretty much the first 6 games write themselves. And then the next 3, these are intriguing. And I was between a few on this one. But I really think this might be one of the more intriguing matchups of the rest of the day. It's Arizona at Houston. The Texans are 4-point favorites in this one. The over-under is 48. Of course, last week we saw the return of Kyler Murray in a winning effort. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts? Arizona heads to Houston.
Houston at home with that hot shot that they say he's not only going to be the rookie of the year, they're already touting that he could be the most valuable player in the AFC. And hey, the way he's playing, stranger things have happened, and I couldn't tell you it wouldn't be deserving. So him alone and what he adds to that team and to their offense against the Arizona defense, I think that's enough for them to cover the. I've got 3.5 down, so I must have adjusted and bought a half a point somewhere along the way. So at this point, I'm looking at minus 3.5. Arizona did get Murray back, and that didn't harm them any. But second week in a row and traveling and going into Houston, I just don't think they're going to have a very easy game. The over-under on this one, I like. I'll buy a half a point and go under 48 on this one. But going to be an interesting game to track.
I think CJ Stroud is what Kyler Murray strives to be. I know that sounds crazy, but at least as a passer, because obviously, look, we saw Kyler is running around. He is very dynamic with his legs, no doubt about it. But in terms of passing at his size, and yes, you can make all the jokes you want, blah, blah, blah. But CJ Stroud's kind of in that area, a little bit bigger. But I think Kyler looks at, the CJ Stroud type and go, that's what whether he admits it or not, that's what I think he needs to be. And this is going to be this is why I think it's so intriguing, because we have 2 teams that I think are very, very similar. I think the Texans are a much better team. I think they're better coached, and they have obviously better parts. But Arizona they were billed as the worst team that was ever going to be fielded in modern football, and they haven't been that bad. I mean, they've gotten 2 wins, one of them over the Cowboys, which, yes, I will take every opportunity to remind you of. So I've been impressed with Arizona only because their ceiling was just so low from what I believed. With that being said, I'm going to go just like you, but double it. I'm going to buy a full point. Give me Houston minus 3. Yeah, I did a little cheating there to get there, but I think Houston wins this game by a field goal, maybe a little more. I think Arizona still has some things to work out, and I think Kyler Murray was kind of like that employee that had a bad attitude, but they didn't want to fire him, so they sent him on, a suspension for 2 weeks. And he came back with this new attitude because, he's had 2 weeks to think about it, things like that. Well, eventually that kind of honeymoon is, I think, going to, fade away. So I was very confident in him last week. I just wonder how much effort he's putting in, and it's not unfair because you have to go look at the film and you have to kind of the stories that are out there that aren't fake. They've all been corroborated. And it was written into his contract about the video games. And yes, the new Call of Duty came out last week. So just something thrown out there. But Houston minus 3 is my bet. This over under, I think, is a little too high. I'm going to take the under. The under 48. I don't think we've turned this into the shootout that I think Vegas expects it
Right.
or maybe wants it to be. I think mistakes are going to be made, and we're going to be a little closer to a 24-21 victory for the Texans. So give me the under 48.
And if you compare year to year, Murray to Stroud, I think the difference you see in Stroud is, and this is not a knock or it's not a joke. I'm not making sport of Kyler Murray, but C.J. Stroud, uh, cerebrally a little more mature coming into the sport, and I think that's the difference. That's what you're seeing. He has that ability to look and go, nope, can't do that, got to do that. And that's definitely playing well for him and well for Houston, and why he's getting all the accolades he is right now. And I think that was the difference. What did you hear about Kyler Murray? Oh, hey, they can't get him to put down the video games. He's doing that, not reading the playbook. You don't hear that about a CJ Stroud. This kid's out there reading the playbook when he should just be having the earphones in and relaxing on the flight home. So I think that's really the big difference in their game.
Agreed. And if you've seen CJ Stroud's post game interviews, maybe you're not religious, and I understand that, but that man is. And it's fine. You don't agree with it. It's fine. Everyone's got their own beliefs. No big deal. That's not what this is about. But at the very least, that is someone you don't necessarily need to worry about off the field.
Right.
Stuff like that. And I'm knocking on wood, and I'm not, believe me, plenty of Christians do really, really bad, dumb things, but not many of those Christians get a microphone put in their face, and the first thing that they say is "All glory to God" and my Lord Jesus Christ. So that is a guy that I think has the head on his shoulders, very screwed on very tightly, and also on the Kyler Murray thing with the video games. I will say, obviously, if you can find a balance, that would be ideal, and he probably has. Let's be honest; he was given a lot of money and maybe fell off a little bit, and hopefully he's got his head tied on straight as well. But could be worse things you could be getting into. If the worst thing that you have to deal
Right.
with Kyler
Correct.
Murray is he's got to put the video game controller down, you're not worried about him being out at 2 a.m. at this club or getting arrested, but here, so could be a lot worse. And we are kind of nitpicking, and I do somewhat feel bad to kind of always bring it up, but the quarterback not putting in all the effort during the week as a gambler, something I'd like to know about. I think that makes a lot more difference than who's in the stands. But anyways, final thoughts, Raider Jim, for this episode of the NFL Weekly.
Who can believe that we're already, as you started out by saying, we are at week 11. By this time next week, well, we're going to be talking about turkey. And, the lineup for the Thanksgiving games, we're going to be talking tomorrow. We're going to start talking about NCAA basketball. We got the Maui Classic and things like that coming up. It's like and horse racing at Del Mar, my gosh, it's like Christmas has come early on the West Coast.
Amen. Amen. And I don't want to jinx it, but maybe a little tease for everyone out there. We may have a nice little surprise for you next week. So you make sure you want to tune in. So you're listening. So you can tune out your uncle at the Thanksgiving table talking about politics. You pop in your earbud. You could listen to us talk about football on that one. But my final thoughts, I echo everything Raider Jim just said. But here in San Diego, unfortunately, we did lose one of our own, and one of the best people this city has to offer in Peter Seidler yesterday. He did pass away at the age of 63. Of course, most known as the chairman and owner of the San Diego Padres. And obviously that's kind of how I got to know him at first. But when you dive in and you kind of hear and see and hear the stories and things like that, and look, everybody gets, when they pass, everybody has the best stories for these people. But I'm reading articles from 2008, 4 years before he bought the Padres, things like that, the things he did for the city, the things he did for people. And not necessarily because, look, give to charities, that's fantastic. Who am I to say? But I think one of the best things that he did is he went to the people and helped them kind of face to face, rather than, here's a check, go do with what you want, Red Cross or this or that, which is still great. But Peter Seidler was a fantastic man. And on the Padres side of it, I've been a fan of the Padres my entire life. Never once. Well, there was one year the Padres actually decided to spend before Peter Seidler, and it was 1998. And the only reason that was it was to build this beautiful stadium we have downtown, which is great. Love it. But right after that vote was passed, we went back to being a very, very small market team. Peter Seidler changed all that. And you know what? Unfortunately, it didn't work. But growing up my entire life, I'd rather you go out and try and not succeed than just give up from the beginning. And Peter Seidler gave us that opportunity. And I don't know what happens here. And to be honest, it's not a question that needs to be even asked, let alone answered. However, as a Padre fan, I just want to thank Peter Seidler, his entire family, for everything he did over the last 10 years for the Padres and everything he did in his life for the city and for the people that he loves so much. So, but with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are First. It's time for y'all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. We'll talk to y'all very soon. Take care.
Peace out.